this is a insane up game.
My son's an influencer, and I was like, I don't even know what that means. Are you getting a full-time job?
All right, I am here with Tyler Funk, the director of Anything for Fame. Thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah, of course. Pleasure to be on.
Yeah, so this film, and I'll let you kind of describe it in a second here, but this film was genuinely fascinating to me. I spent 6 years as a high school teacher. And so this kind of phenomenon of doing anything for fame, right? Having YouTuber as the number one career choice, right? This is something that I definitely experienced with my students. But before we dive too much into the documentary, how would you kind of describe what this film is about?
Yeah, I'd say it's a character documentary that profiles young creators who are really willing to do anything for fame. And, I really mean that in the sense of it's probably more a film for adults. It's definitely, I don't think we have a PG rating. Um, but it's taking a look at like what's actually going on out there and what is the landscape and what happens when you put it all on the line for fame, and is it worth it? It's kind of what the film gets to.
Yeah, I found it's so fascinating, these different characters that you brought together who are chasing the same or a similar objective but very very different paths, and your path as well has been connected to the social media world, not so much as an influencer, but I believe you were behind like the White Ninja series on Vine, which a lot of the subjects in the documentary probably wouldn't even know what Vine is. But did that previous kind of experience, in a different sense, but in the world of social media, did that influence you wanting to make this?
Yeah, it really, so I had this series, White Ninja, which was based on a web comic that was developed in Saskatoon. And those guys had this hilarious comic, and so I wanted to make it into a Vine series. So I worked with them to develop this property, and we wrote like 200 episodes. And yeah, I really got a sense through that of what it was like to be, on Vine and in that landscape, and just how incredibly competitive it is, how much content you need to produce, and like what a challenge it is to actually monetize. We had a ton of success. Like that show got optioned. We were rep by UPTA. We pitched all the major networks in Hollywood, which was like a real joy doing that. But that all happened the week Vine shut down. And so we went from being this super hot property to everyone being like, oh, you're Viners? Sorry, like I'm kind of busy, but I got 10 minutes for you. And that was fascinating seeing how fickle everything was, right? How much this popularity contest exists online, but also in traditional Hollywood.
Yeah, though that's really interesting, that kind of connection there. And to your point, right, with this kind of form of media, you could go viral, you could be popular, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a sustainable kind of career, which I think a lot of people don't really understand the intricacies there for sure.
Yeah, and like that show, I was grateful. Like it was an animated series, right? So it's like not any of us were doing this stupid stuff. Our stupid characters do stupid things because it's cartoon. But it's really different if you're the lead character and you're taking that on and you're trying to do crazy stupid stuff for attention, but then that's also you and your face, and you can't leave that as easy. Whereas we were really just making a show for entertainment. Social media gets blurry because that entertainment also becomes you, the individual, and you can get trapped within a character, as some of our people in the film definitely have been.
Yeah, 100%. And let's talk about some of these people. So you had several kind of influencers, however you might coin these folks, and you kind of focused in, I would say, on three, on Ava, Jake, and Jimani. Can you just talk a little bit about what this process was like? I imagine that you kind of cast a much wider net and then ended up focusing.
Yeah, we started by sending out emails to over 250 influencers, a huge rounds of just back and forth, sometimes just trying to get someone on a call being like, hey, are you interested or not, where are you at? And even from that was hours and hours of watching TikToks, reels, YouTube videos, and constantly trying to change our profiles because the algorithm will start showing you only one type of content creator. And we wanted this film, like the internet, not to look only at, say, OnlyFans models or only at rooftoppers or only at guys doing stunts. We really wanted to show all the different kind of ways people were pushing the limit to get fame. That's what we were really focused on. We're like, what are these different verticals that we see emerging that a lot of creators are falling into? So yeah, it was a huge process. Interestingly enough, Jake, we had early on, he was down, we had some great chats, and then he had a really falling out with content and he was just not really available. So we at the beginning, we weren't sure if we were going to have him. Jumaane was a last minute ad because someone else had canceled and we had some time and we were on Reddit and we saw, hey, this guy's exploding on Reddit. Let's reach out, see if he wants to be in the film. And then when we shot for the first 24 days, Ava was not in the film. So two of the people,
Oh, wow.
I mean, basically all three of them were added afterwards.
Wow.
And that was the nice thing of the schedule and the freedom. The National Film Board is such an amazing institution. I think it's probably one of the last ones left that really lets artists lead in that regard. Whereas as we're pitching other projects, we see how people want you to have your entire doc scripted, kind of done when you take it to them. The NFB was amazing, and the TELUS Fund, where they really trust us to tell this story, and that gave us 70 days to shoot. So we were able to add and chase stories that were interesting as we were doing this. And that's where we, I think ended up with such amazing characters. Because if we had set out with the first people we'd interview and had to shoot with, I don't think we wouldn't have gotten people at the right emotional arcs of what they were going through.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really interesting to me because I kind of assumed that those characters were central from the beginning. And you're right, the film I think works so well because these three and the other individuals that you interviewed, but those three in particular are so different. They're so different. And Jumaane in particular has not found maybe the success certainly that Ava has and that Jake has to a lesser extent. Did you always plan on, if not Jumaane, including at least someone who is trying but maybe not succeeding in that kind of same sense?
Yeah, I think the fascinating thing with the internet is you never really know where everyone's going to go, right? And we didn't want the film to say, hey, don't be a content creator, or hey, be a content creator. I think one of the mistakes of past films, such as, I don't remember the name here, there's the Netflix one a few years ago on influencers, but they were all high-level influencers. And it was like, it's like if you made a film about basketball and you just showed LeBron and, the A-list guys. And so we really want to show, what are people actually going through? What are the different levels of success? And what does it mean when you put everything into it and you fail and you damage those relationships, you lose your job, you go to jail? And yeah, so we were definitely looking for people at different stages of their journey. When we started filming with both Jake and Ava, they kind of had already had some of the really big viral moments. Whereas Jumaane was just right on the kind of we kind of landed our shoot very well with his social media journey.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And again, provides that more holistic, comprehensive picture, right? To your point of the sports analogies, and this was in the film as well, right? You have a better chance of going professional in multiple sports than really being the top of the top in this field. And what I also loved about the documentary is that it seemed, at least to me, that everyone was simply presented as they are. It didn't feel as though you went in with a specific kind of way that you wanted to portray influencers. Was that always the case? Did you always kind of have a very broad, we just want to show this experience, or did you go in with a particular thesis and it kind of shift through?
Yeah, as a viewer, I don't really appreciate documentaries where the filmmaker is a huge part of it. And so we made a decision early on, like, I'm not going to be Michael Moore or whoever walking around giving you my opinion. And Michael Moore's made some amazing films, not a knock on him at all. But, I'm not that personality. And I really enjoy documentaries that we kind of just spend more time with the characters instead of the filmmaker. Um, and so we thought, well, this is more interesting. If people can make their own judgments, we have had such different reactions. People love Ava, people hate Ava, people love Jumanji, they hate Jumanji. People really see different things in the creators. And I think that speaks to us doing a good job of showing what I think is a fair perspective of them, but also a very real one of showing different elements of their life and not just who they are online, but really getting an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. And yeah, like I don't think anyone needs me to tell them the answer. I think they can watch the film and kind of arrive at what they think of everyone's actions.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I feel similarly. I'm taken out of a film when I can just tell so explicitly what the director and the filmmaker is wanting me to feel and wanting me to think. So I definitely appreciated the kind of openness that this film presented.
Yeah,
Um,
like,
yeah,
oh, sorry. Just
no,
just
no,
building on that,
no,
we
go.
talked a lot about there's a lot of those films out there sometimes that feel like Wikipedia articles where you get the thesis and then you got to keep watching and you're like, well, I already know this perspective.
Yeah,
And so we really wanted it to be an entertaining experience for our viewers and really just follow these character journeys and let people discover that.
yeah, and it worked quite well. You mentioned that there is kind of a difference of opinion when it comes to these different characters. Some people hate, some people love. And Eva in particular, you mentioned, I found her to actually be quite fascinating. She had some extremely articulate and well established kind of points of view. And she made some comments about the kind of broader media as well, right? She said something along the lines of media doesn't care about being honest with you. So why do I can present whatever I want to present, right? Was that something that you always wanted to kind of include on the side in this documentary, the references to the mainstream media as well?
Yeah, like we really wanted creators that all were looking at social media as a game. There's a few creators out there, some we interviewed, some that aren't in the film, that I think go viral almost by accident, or they could be dealing with certain inner demons or other things that get viral attention. And we weren't interested in those stories because I think that's a whole different mental health conversation. Whereas we really want creators that identify this is a insane up game and how are we going to play it, you know because I think that gets to the bigger conversation of, yeah, like, what do we do about platforms and algorithms, and we really want creators that were aware of that and we're manipulating that and playing in that world.
Yeah. Did I'm curious, did this film, like you talked about platforms and the algorithms, did creating this documentary change your relationship with social media at all? Or what is your relationship with social media?
Yeah, like my take on it after all this is social media is great for marketing. If you have a product to sell, if you're busy selling something, it's an amazing tool. It's a tool of our generation. There's never been such an amazing chance to sell and to connect with others. But I don't think if you're just putting content out there and expecting to monetize, that's very realistic. I think you got to say, like, there's a lot of huge competitors in every space and podcasts and absolutely everything now, right? And so if it brings you joy, fantastic. Like if you like making your content because it brings you joy, it brings you community, that's great. Or if you're funneling it to try and sell something, that's great. But if you think that you can kind of just make some stuff and get rich and quit your 9 to 5, I think throughout this process, we just realized more and more how insanely tough that is. And that creators really need to have a big game plan, a big strategy. And even with all that, you're still competing against giants now. Like massive media companies are also creating content that you're competing against. It's not like YouTube of the early days where you just picked up, made a video, and maybe you'd find a following.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I agree. And I think people are starting to understand that a little bit more, right? It definitely was this idea in the kind of last 10 years or so that you can just strike gold overnight, right? And it's not like that. That's not how things work. So I guess in a sense, it's not so much different than a lot of other avenues, including more traditional filmmaking.
Yeah, I think there is a lot in common. I think the one difference, though, from the film and television industry is that there's methods that protect us, right? Before releasing this film, we have lawyers go over it, insurance. Like, there's so many different steps that help protect us, that help make sure we're kind of doing it right to not put ourselves in a really negative position. Whereas social media, as a content creator, you don't have any of that. You don't have the resources for that. Like, you're your own publicist, you're your own lawyer, you're your own executive producer, your own writer, and that's a lot for any one human to manage. Um, and it's also, if the goal is always to be more provocative or to up stuff, you're going to cross a line just by definition of how long you do it.
Yeah, and obviously you touched on that in the film with various lawsuits that have been levied, and you also dove into even darker material beyond the legal implications, right? Individuals in this space who may end up taking their own lives, as you kind of examined. Was that side of this something you always planned to get into, or that just develop as you learn more and talk to these folks?
Yeah, so I think I'd mentioned before at the start, like, I grew up in Banff, Alberta with a really small group of friends. Small town, like, I think there's 30 kids totally in my grade. And the plan since grade 6 was to move to Vancouver to make films. It was a very clear plan. I always wanted to do it, and I had a few friends doing it with me. And one of them actually made this film with me, Sebastian Mercado, who's the editor and producer. Um, like, we went to school together and then UBC. And along with us was another friend named David, who was kind of like the actor in the group and the entertainer, and would often do like outrageous things. He loved to like entertain and would do like the most ridiculous stunts, almost kind of like Jake in a way, of some of those like big gestures. When we were at film school, he actually ended up taking his life. Well, we were living together, we were all at film school together. Totally, it was like a big event that took a lot of time for me to process. But also led for me to have a lot of empathy for the people that we see as the class clown, maybe, and like trying to understand a little bit of like what's going on behind them. A lot of the red flags that I think we probably missed in a weird way, because we sometimes thought he was entertaining, but it was actually more a cry for help. And so that was always there. And I think that also led into the development of this film, of seeing such wild behavior online and being like, well, if people aren't making money out of this behavior, they're getting the views, but they're not making money really. Like, what is the motivation? And I think for certain creators, it is maybe a bit more about a cry for help, saying, I need attention, I need relevance, I need community around me. Yeah, that's a really long way of saying we always were kind of like
Yeah.
aware of that connection within the film.
Mhm. No, I think that connection is apparent in the film. Like you mentioned, how that experience that you went through kind of developed your capacity for empathy. And I feel as though this film, it puts empathy at the forefront, right? These characters are presented in a way you may not agree with everything that they do or everything that they say, but I think it's presented in a way that you at least feel with these characters.
Yeah, like, my goal was never to judge them. I think there's enough people on the internet judging other creators. And I don't think that really adds to making good content from a content producer myself. And that's where I think, through the lens of empathy and understanding other people, we actually learn a bit more about the world, and in turn learn a bit more about ourselves.
So when hopefully a lot of people watch this film, uh, what what do you want them to take away after watching it on their TV or elsewhere?
Yeah, like, I think, to me, the big takeaway is, and I think it's even said kind of clearly in the film, is a bit about the relevance, about fame, like understanding fame a bit, and like why we all have that desire, and that it's not a bad thing. We all want attention from those around us. But what are the ways we can find it in a healthy, sustainable manner? Like, what, I really wish the best for all of the creators in the film. They're all friends that I still talk to. And I think that's the thing a lot of them are still working through. Um, And so that, yeah, that's my takeaway. And we've had the film's been out for 6 months on Paramount Plus. It has a strong run there, and now with the wide release for the NFB, we're really hoping to get a lot more eyes on it. And it's just been the last week's gone kind of international on Paramount in France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand. So hopefully a lot more people will get to see it and share their thoughts.
Yeah, I hope so as well. Before I let you go, as a filmmaker, you're always doing something, I'm sure. Is there anything in particular that you're working on right now?
For sure, yeah. So we have a bunch of different projects kind of based around this world that we're developing. There's like 4 or 5 different between feature lengths and series, all on influencers and kind of how tech is changing us. And then besides that, I'm also a dad. I got 2 kids, so that's like a full-time life also, right? And like after being away so long for the film, it's like putting that time back in. Obviously you can tell my like lighting setup here is like brutal. Like I promise people the film is actually looks gorgeous. So there's little stuff around the house I got to do, like figure out my lighting setup for interviews. There's
Yeah.
that long list of things of when you go away filming for a year that you're like, okay, gotta get to fixing these. But yeah, project wise, I think for every filmmaker to survive, you have to have like 8 to 10 projects all the time that you're pushing and in different stages of development. And then by some miracle, one of them moves ahead and you're on to the next one. So I'll let you know when I know for sure which one it's going to be.
100%. Well, I look forward to seeing whatever is next. And thanks so much for chatting with me, Tyler.
Of course, man. Thanks for watching the film. Like I really appreciate it. It's it's always awesome for someone to take the time. It's tough in this attention economy.